The right to own and use private property is fundamental to freedom and integral to the pursuit of happiness. The United States Constitution guarantees that right and obligates the government to protect it. James Madison, who wrote the Constitution, stated that, quote, "As a man is said to have a right to his property, he may equally be said to have a property in his rights," closed quote. In the recent Columbia University case, the state of New York attempted to use eminent domain to acquire real estate against the wishes of the owners of real estate and then sell that property at a profit to Columbia University, since Columbia had failed to reach an agreement with the owners to purchase it directly from them. Columbia and the state of New York argued to a judge that the use to which an Ivy League university would put the real estate was a greater benefit to the public than the use to which the owners of 2 gas stations and a public storage facility would put the real estate. But in a startling legal development, the appellate division of the Supreme Court of the state of New York sided with the current owners and held that unless the state itself was going to own the properties and put them to a truly public use, like a park or a highway or a school, as the Fifth Amendment requires, the value judgment of college campus versus gas stations and public storage facility was not one for the court to make. This is a remarkable retreat from the big government argument and a happy return to the true meaning of the Fifth Amendment. It shows a judicial recognition of the inalienable right to own private property and to use the private property as the owner sees fit, not as the government or its patrons prefer. Joining me now is James Ostrowski, author of Political Class Dismissed and Essays Against Politics, including What's Wrong with Buffalo, who also wrote about this case on LewRockwell.com. James, welcome back to Freedom Watch.
Thanks, Judge. Thanks for having me.
I guess you were as surprised as I was, as all those who are in the business of defending the right to own private property, at this decision here in New York City, of all places, defending the property rights of 2 gas station owners and a guy that owns a public storage facility against the almighty state of New York and the almighty Columbia University. What do you think?
It's astonishing. I read about it in the New York Times, and Judge Catterson, who I do not know, I'm from upstate, he's from downstate, we got to give him a medal, maybe the Robert Yates Medal in honor of the great libertarian judge from Colonial Times from New York. And you really have to go back almost that far to get a strong pro-property rights, pro-individual rights decision. And all I can say is, this judge deserves our applause.
You know, when the colonists fought the Revolution and wrote the Constitution, they had just experienced a time in American history where the king claimed the power to seize anybody's property without just compensation for a public use or to give to one of his patrons. Jefferson argued the opposite of that. Jefferson argued that the essence of private property is the right to exclude. And Jefferson said that means excluding even the government. And if the government wants your property, it can't just take it and pay you for it. You have to enter into an amicable, voluntary relationship with the government whereby you agree to sell it to the government. Between those two views, the government can take what it wants, the European model, and the government can only have property after you agree to sell it to the government at a price the two of you agree on. Came the Fifth Amendment, which required a public use of the property. What has become of this public use requirement since it was first written in the Bill of Rights?
Well, if you study the course of constitutional history, the words in the Constitution tend to be interpreted in such a way as to favor the cause of more government power. So you have what's a very specific term, public use, somehow gets transformed into public purpose. And this is basically judge-made law.
Right.
We've had a lot of that, particularly since the New Deal. The words get interpreted. I think even the term the needs of society appear in the Kelo case, which I was just reading. And so where did the needs of society appear in the Constitution? But, as Murray Rothbard, whose work I think you know well, he often said that any sort of mechanism designed to limit the size of government will often be used for the opposite purpose, and often the Constitution is sort of stretched like rubber and actually made to justify huge expanses of government power.
And Jefferson, of course, wrote shortly before he died that in the long run, power and government and order would increase and individual liberty would decrease. What he didn't realize, or at least didn't articulate at the time as nicely as you just did, was that some of his own words and some of his own ideas reduced to words by others would be used to justify that diminution of liberty and increase of government power. We start with things that seem harmless, like, let's see, the city of New York wants to build something called the World Trade Towers, or wants to build something like Lincoln Center. The World Trade Towers will enhance economic activity. A rising tide lifts all ships. Everybody's going to do better. Lincoln Center will deliver culture to the masses. Everyone will do better. The problem is that the land on which the World Trade Towers were built and the land on which Lincoln Center was built were owned by private property owners who did not want to sell their property to the city of New York. So you're right. That's where public use turns into public benefit, and the courts allow the government to take property from a private property owner, pay its fair market value, and then sell it at a profit to another private property owner.
Exactly. And, you know, forgetting the law and just looking at the consequences, we've seen the dreadful consequences of urban renewal, not only in my city of Buffalo, but really throughout the country. I mean, who are these people to think that they can plan an economy, that they should determine what kind of businesses, houses, and so on, and infrastructure are to be placed in a certain area? They don't have that ability. So not only is it really a violation of the original intent of the Constitution, but it's just terrible public policy to give tremendous amounts of power to unaccountable bureaucrats in these authorities.
We are chatting with James Ostrowski about government seizure of private property. James, what is wrong with Buffalo? What's going on up there with private property rights?
Well, we're sort of have the biggest, most expensive government in the country outside of New York City. Now, the city has, I went to Brooklyn Law School, very familiar with it. The city has its own economy and can absorb a certain amount of cost of government, but Buffalo really can't. But we have basically had for about 50 years the highest cost of government anywhere in the country, and a city that was once an economic dynamo around 1900 to say 1950 has turned into a basket case, and that the Tea Party movement kind of started about 5 years ago in Buffalo. We're happy the rest of the country has joined us.
Right. You know, this Columbia University case, which is, if you had a chance to read the opinion, yes, it could have been written by Judge Yates, or it could have been written by Thomas Jefferson. I mean, it literally says things like the city and the state and Columbia University made the argument that an Ivy League university is a better use of the land than 2 gas stations and a public storage garage. That's not a value judgment for the court to make. That's a value judgment for the owner of the real estate to make. However, you also know that the court to which this case will be appealed, the Court of Appeals of the State of New York, the highest state court in the state of New York, just ruled 6-1 the other way in the case of Atlantic Yards, which is the city of New York condemning property in Brooklyn so that a wealthy developer, Bruce Ratner, can build an arena and buy the New Jersey Nets and bring them from Bergen County, New Jersey, over to Brooklyn. And they did so because of the greater public good of having this arena in Brooklyn as opposed to the land as it presently exists.
Well, I just have to say, I've read that decision too, and Judge Catterson not only has a lot of brains, he's got a lot of courage, because he may be facing a reversal up there. It's hard to reconcile the two cases other than to say that Judge Catterson is correct if you believe in limited government and individual rights. And Chief Judge Lippman, I think, it has it wrong. So hopefully this persuasive decision from the appellate division will get the judges up there to change their minds. They did leave a little wiggle room for themselves, and hopefully they'll change their minds when the case gets up there.
Maybe they will, and I think you put your finger right on the button when you said persuasive decision. I'm going to tell you what happened in New York City yesterday. The mayor signed a contract to condemn certain property in the Bronx in order to build luxury high-rises, and that condemnation had to be approved by the city council. There are 46 members of the city council of the city of New York. It's the largest city council in the United States. The vote was 45-1 against authorizing the city to condemn this property in the Bronx and sell it to a wealthy Manhattan developer. So maybe a trend is discernible here of a return to basic values with respect to the right to use, own, occupy, and exclude even the government from your private property. What do you think? Am I too optimistic, or is this happening right before our eyes?
Well, you know, New York, really, the whole state is in a state of decline, and it's about time that the judges look around at what's going on and say, you know, we have to start enforcing the Constitution. Maybe if we did, things would pick up in the economy. But one of the points that Judge Catterson makes is how eminent domain has hurt minorities and hurt the poor. So it's a very not only scholarly decision, but it's a populist decision. I think judges should be concerned about the rights of all the people.